Hi, and welcome to the eighth episode in our series, Unite for Small. We are super excited about this particular one because we're going to be covering a slightly different angle on this topic of post-pandemic business. We often, when we think post-pandemic business and difficulty and challenges, we often think of the very small companies, the very small businesses. And yes, this is Unite for Small, so there has been a very strong emphasis on the plight of small businesses. However, in a country like ours, the truth is the purest definition of small to medium business does extend quite far up into the economy. So we find some of the more larger established brands still classifying as the small to medium segment in our country. And with that in mind, we wanted to pay special attention, or let's just say a little bit more attention to the plight of the more medium business sector in South Africa. So we wanted to look at what are some of the challenges that this segment experiences or is experiencing right now, taking into account that historically, certainly for the last 5 to 10 years, this particular segment in South Africa has experienced very sizable, very significant growth. So it has it's had a very big effect and contribution to the South African economy. With that in mind, I am very happy to have really good experts, representatives of this sector. They come with wealth of experience in dealing with the sector, understanding the needs of the sector, and working closely with the sector to make sure that business continues to thrive and expand. Before I do any kind of half-hearted introductions, I'm going to have the guests introduce themselves. We will start with ladies first. Tessa, please tell us about your background.
Morning, Drushan, and hi to all those that are listening. Thanks for tuning in. I am Tessa Clark. I head up sales and marketing team for Adapt IT SAP division. And a little bit about myself. I grew up in KZN on a beautiful sugar farm in Zululand. And in 2008, I was offered an opportunity to be part of a graduate program with a leading brewery here in South Africa. So I packed my bags, moved to Joburg, and started to embrace big city life. As I grew and progressed through my career, I got to be in some challenging and fun roles across business analysis, planning business and technical cutovers. I've done business engagements, process enablement, and I've got to travel to some really beautiful countries through the work I do and meet some really, really interesting people. It's amusing how the wheels turn. So I started in marketing, sales, and distribution team on an IT functional side. And now, 12 or so years later, I find myself doing marketing and sales on the business side for an IT company.
This is fantastic. Tess, I'm not sure whether you know, but on the prior 2 episodes of this particular series, we had a lot of talk about beer. And I think that this may have something to do with the fact that, you are now appearing on the show as someone who was a graduate in breweries, in the area of brewing beer. So it's all very aligned with our core message of the show, which is beer is good. Let's move to Nishith. Nishith, tell us about your background.
Kirushan, I've done half the continent, and SAP has always stayed very close to my heart. I started from a background perspective. I started my career back in India, and from there, then moved to Southeast Asia, sitting in Singapore, covering the Southeast Asian market. From there to Europe, from there to South Africa, back to Middle East from there, and back to South Africa last year. So I feel very great about South Africa. Settled here now, running a practice with Adapt IT. So yeah, you're talking to someone who has covered half the continent, and my background is more of techno-functional on SAP. But yeah, of course, with a business cap on my head.
Right, of course. Can't get away from the business mandate. So let's go back to Tessa for a second. Tessa, what made you specialize in this particular area of technology or in this particular area?
It's a funny story, KG. So I was about standard 9, and I sat down with my dad, and I told him proudly I wanted to be a photographer. And he took it well. He calmly looked at me and gave the correct answer from any dad should give you, and that was, Tessa, you can be whatever you want to be. But he followed it with, you will first study and pass a BCom. So I took that, rationalized it to myself, told myself that a commerce background would help me run this photography company that I was dreaming of. And so I went off and studied a BCom. And I remember sitting in an information systems lecture one day, and we were discussing process mapping, business modeling, and something it just clicked for me. There was this interest that I'd never found in a subject before, and it kind of ignited a bit of a passion. It showed in my marks. I was lucky and selected to do IS honors after that, and then when I started working real life business, I got exposed to getting to map these business scenarios, and I just love kind of putting the pieces together, solving those business problems, and really creating value. And then from the SAP side, I was fortunate. I was exposed to SAP very early in my career, and it's been an interesting relationship with SAP and myself from a business side. But at the moment, they've got a big drive and focus on intelligent enterprise, and that really excites me, and that's the future.
That's awesome. I'm personally very familiar with the concept of do whatever it is that you want, just get your degree first. Nishith, tell us about you. What made you specialize in this area?
Hiroshima, specialization is a very misleading word. At least in the SAP arena, where the length and breadth of the solution is unknown to anyone. It can work wonders if you really specialize into SAP. My journey in SAP started back sometime in 2000, and I've been into different roles, technical roles, functional roles, and then finally into business where I run. I have, in addition to SAP, worked on this setting up practices for digital transformation. I've worked on the IT governance assignments. I've helped clients with their cybersecurity initiatives. But SAP somewhere stayed very close to my heart. So yes, over 2 decades of business experience with SAP, and today I'm trying to get the ROIs of this specialization in SAP, running a practice here with Adapt. We feel proud in what we do as SAP. Yeah, if that can be taken as a specialization, then yes, we do specialize in the SAP business.
Yeah, I have to agree, Nishith. In today's world of technology, I was actually talking about this with some of my friends that, even if you take one particular area of technology in today's world, it's hard to call oneself a specialist because there's so much depth under absolutely every pocket that one can just be a specialist in the smallest area. And even if you're looking at one subject matter or one piece of technology, it's hard to even, promise or make the claim that one is a specialist even across that entire technology, just one piece of technology. It is quite a stretch in today's world. Now, for those of you who have just joined, we have fantastic guests. You've just missed the introductions. If you've just joined over the last couple of seconds, you would have missed the introductions. But that shouldn't stop you from enjoying the value that our guests will be sharing over the next little while. Today's show is a lot of fun. We're going to be talking about the plight and the experience of the upper mid-market in South Africa. We've put a lot of focus on small business in this post-pandemic environment. And now we're talking still within the SME framework, slightly higher up the market. We're going and talking about what are the more established businesses doing, the businesses that are not the very large enterprises with a lot of red tape. Even though they are a bit smaller, they still have to conform to a lot of policy. It isn't as easy to make dramatic change as it is in a much smaller firm. So these are the unique dimensions of the segment. It's also a very high growth segment for our country. So a very, very vital segment for our economy and our prosperity as a nation. Please become part of the show by putting your questions and comments into the Q&A box. This is the hallmark of the show. We really make your voice part of our conversation. So, the best part about attending or visiting or participating on this show is that you get a chance to have your voice heard. I will ensure that every comment or question becomes part of the dialogue in some way or another. All right, so let's get straight into the meat of this discussion. Or should I say the heat of this discussion? Not quite sure which one yet. Let's have Tessa give us some insight into that. So the upper mid market, Tessa, has demonstrated a very strong growth, as I mentioned earlier, in South Africa for a number of years. The pandemic would no doubt have affected this. How has this happened?
Yeah, so most organizations like ourselves had been looking up to the upper mid-market space. As we all know, good growth was achieved in the sector for many years, and the pandemic has clearly impacted this. As a software and service business operating in Africa and globally, we can clearly see our customers are facing challenges in the market in this tough economy. We see their pain, we see what they're facing and the impact that this demand has on them. Yes, it varies from sector to sector, and it will obviously depend on how the lockdown levels have impacted their business operations. And we're finding as a whole, the larger entities, of course, they were built, they had that bigger base that could withstand this type of corruption. But most companies have had to reorganize themselves, remodel, and find efficiencies in the way that they operate in order to survive. The situation has improved, but this will continue for a while, right? What we see is business and markets adapting and recovering over time.
Okay, this is very good insight. And so let's just double click a little bit more into this point of risk. What are some of the real risks facing the sector?
So KG, I was in a webinar last month, weren't we all, right? But the guest speaker was covering kind of the future and the new normal approach. And his key takeaway was that the biggest risk for any company at the moment is not changing. And this really is, it's real and significant. So many companies are literally just trying to survive day by day. This pandemic has created immense risk to both public and private organizations. And these companies are grappling with so many new concepts, new business models, this suddenly distributed workforce, which comes with its own complexities within South Africa, right? This whole new trust that we have to get into with our teams and the people we work with, this widespread uncertainty and disruption. And then you pair this all with the decline in international trade, travel, domestic consumption. It's been a bit crazy. And then I hate to be the messenger here, but survival's only going to get companies through the short term, right? Companies have to change. They have to adopt a digital mindset and new technologies to create themselves opportunities in the new world. And I'm not just talking about Microsoft Teams and kind of giving your employees a data sim and you think you've changed and adapt. It's imperative that companies are focusing on digitalization, on innovation, and moving into this future. At Adapt.IT, we pride ourselves in empowering organizations to drive better performance, provide better experiences, and ultimately support them in achieving more. We work closely with IT structures and within our clients, and gone are the days of your IT-driven agendas, right? IT needs to be driving value, and we need to look to partner with our clients to ensure value creation. This risk topic, I could go on and on. We could do this for an hour, but the key takeaway is companies need to change to survive.
Yeah. And I really like the point there that it isn't just about handing an employee a data SIM card and just maybe equipping them with some additional teleconference facilities. And I think that the reality is that we did step into this pandemic environment on a very, ill-prepared basis. We had to make a transition in 2 days. Yeah. So the reality is that we believed that we just had to do whatever we could do within that time frame. And then after that, because nothing really broke, we persisted in that slipshod temporary format for a very long time. And I think that right now, businesses are starting to realize and leaders are starting to realize that the actual consequences of remote work extend beyond just the technology infrastructure, the bare minimum just to keep the show on the road. There's an element of the people dimension, and there's an element of process that needs to be thought with in greater depth in order to make this whole thing work. So I love all the points that you raised there. So on this note of extending beyond just technological capability, we do know that a lot of people have been talking cloud. And in fact, I myself have heard a number of people say that remote work equals cloud, meaning in order to make a remote work possible, you need to have some kind of cloud infrastructure in place. Now, this may or may not be fully true. That's a whole other discussion on the subject of platform, which I'm not going to really get into. However, I would like, Nishith, for you to give me some comment here. There has been a lot of pressure towards cloud, because of this whole pandemic situation and remote work. So we had to now start thinking more about cloud than we did before. However, some of these companies, especially in this upper mid-market segment, the more established segment, it has been impractical to move everything over into the cloud. There has been this, slight worry or caution around moving everything into the cloud because of a variety of factors. And then obviously moving the ERP of a company into the cloud, you're moving the heart. It's the heart. It's a mini heart transplant for the business. Just tell us a little bit more about this cloud decision making in this upper mid market segment.
Completely with you, Kerushan. If you remember, in fact, I liked your speech. You also touched that point, quick changes. The quick changes that we also saw a movement on people's digital transformation journeys. People started expediting their initiatives, whatever they were doing. And cloud became a very important aspect of the digital transformation journey. In my views, these moments of extraordinary challenges is testing our collective will. We all know this. But what we notice is it's also bringing out the best of our collective humanity. The situation is a little fluid. If you see, considering the COVID-19 impact, and we all working now from home, trying to still access whatever we can. So we're looking at efficiencies. I definitely feel the world is no doubt navigating through an uncertain period with few precedents. To this extent, since I work with SAP and SAP is close to heart, we all know SAP is committed to helping customers move forward from COVID-19 for their employees, customers, their businesses. And we also saw a movement on that side, a true cloud push. It became important for the organizations to stay resilient at the same time, address the challenging environment by staying agile. Large or small, coming to the point where we're talking middle segment enterprises, large or small, each contribution matters in fight against COVID-19. Each segment struggle, not just the middle segment businesses, even the large enterprises and the small enterprises. To support, even when we talk of ERP and talking specifically of SAP, we saw SAP establishing a 3 million COVID-19 emergency fund and increasing support to social sector partners globally. To us, as the implementers and organizations which actually cater to the agenda of SAP, plus their customers, we saw to this extent, cloud enables flexibility, scalability. SAP also pushed that agenda, supported customers adopt SAP, the cloud deployments. And what's stayed critical to companies right now is to make sure that the business stays viable and that employees are healthy, positioned for success. And in that, of course, a component of ERP, which is a business system for any organization, to keep supporting them, keep involving them, keep helping them with what they do on a day-to-day basis. So we saw cloud adoption, which took a front seat, and we also saw a lot of customers thinking of ERPs on cloud, and SAP to be no exception. We saw a push of customers who were thinking of doing something around SAP suddenly saying, okay, we can adopt a cloud model and can have a ERP system which can work for us. The deployments were faster, considering that you've now got accelerators available to us. And yes, so cloud adoption is a reality. It happened. Pandemic, I guess, pushed that agenda much faster. And yes, we're sitting in clouds today.
Yeah, 100%. So, on that note, regarding the movement of cloud, the movement towards cloud more aggressively, particularly when we look at ERP, I think that there's a lot of dimensions to be considered. And I think that a lot of business owners, business leaders are in the process, in the throes of making, very significant decisions regarding how they move their infrastructure or how they move their applications into the cloud. And the question as to whether or not to move a heavy, deeply customized on-premise deployment into the cloud is top of mind, and definitely something that a lot of business leaders are speaking about right now. So this is the time, guys, if you do have those questions, if you do have thoughts, worries, concerns, you are talking about relevant providers, you are exploring your options of how you can allow your remote workforce to access your critical business applications, now's the time to put your questions forward to us. You're welcome to reach us either on the link that will be provided towards the end of the show, or you could just put a question right now into the question and answer box, and I will personally ensure that we respond to everything that comes through. Okay, so Nishith, I think we just scratched the surface here. Let's start confronting some of the more difficult questions that business leaders are facing, and that is, tell me about price. Is it in fact cheaper to move to the cloud?
A question that I come across very frequently, Kirishan. Yes and no. If you really go wrong, it could wind up costing you more if you do not approach cloud carefully. Having said that, it doesn't mean that you will not like to adopt the benefits cloud brings, cloud deployments bring, and in true sense, it's a viable option, depending on what you're trying to move to cloud. To truly weigh the benefits of cloud, you would have to look beyond the opportunities for the hard cost reductions. I mean, that's I always tell all my customers. Sometimes they agree, sometimes they like to have brainstorming sessions, but that has been my statement for a long time. You can acknowledge the soft cost savings that can be realized from cloud's valuable benefits, such as greater developer agility, faster time to market, scalable hardware, which means you pay for what you use. But that necessarily does not mean that the cloud comes cheaper always. It has its own benefits. Let's look into some of those. Cloud computing brings natural economies of scale. The practicalities of cloud computing mean high utilization and smoothing of inevitable peaks and throws in workloads. Rather than using a dedicated server that you own as a business, you have to maintain and pay for regardless of the demand, right? And we saw that demand going down during COVID time. So at that time, the shared server infrastructure becomes more effective and beneficial. And that's where the cloud adoption comes, right? So I would say, this allows the cloud computing providers to optimize the hardware needs of their data centers, which means as a customer, you're not paying for idle infrastructure, which results in lower operating costs for you, right? And that's the benefit. When you run your own localized data centers and servers, you need to buy more hardware than you need in case of failure. In extreme cases, you need to duplicate everything, having spare hardware lying idle just in case of a failure, which may be expensive, right? And those are areas which can actually be addressed by moving to cloud. So I go back to my answer of saying yes and no. If you really work out the architecture right, it can be more. It can bring more business benefits rather than just saying it will be cheaper to move to cloud. So let's adopt cloud. That's not the right approach of moving to cloud.
Right. This is very good insight, and it's something that I personally, it's a topic that I feel very strongly about, I must confess. It's a topic that I've often talked to many audiences about. If we really start digging deep into that aspect of costing, we realize that on-premise isn't actually a once-off, because a lot of these decision makers are finding that they are comparing a single capex expense with an ongoing opex expense. However, it's important to also note that even a non-cloud environment, a fully on-premise environment, is in fact still an OPEX cost plus a CAPEX cost. It's not a pure CAPEX cost. There's a number of those ongoing costs that, inside your answer to that question, there were a number of line items there that when we really go and inspect, they persist month by month. There's the personnel aspect, which is certainly a monthly cost. There's, insurances. There's several line items of costs that persist on an OPEX basis. So I think that when we truly go and reflect on this cost point, we need to do an all-up inspection to see what are all the consequential costs of staying on premise, which include all of those OPEX line items, whether it's on the people side, whether it's on the security side, whether it's on the insurance side. They might be hidden under other broader costs like your payroll cost or your insurance cost, but these are all as a result of keeping your assets on site, and these costs are often neglected. So this is really good conversation here, Nishith. So taking into account all what we've said so far, what are some of the things that would hold a company back from moving to the cloud?
I can smile and say 4 words: security, control, cost, and availability. The parameters that actually drive the entire cloud world. And the concerns are genuine. I will not say the concerns are not genuine. What people sometimes and businesses sometimes forget is they can be addressed. It's not that they can't be addressed, right? Depending on the model of cloud deployment that you actually take for your business, right? And to throw some lights into it, let's say I spoke of those four areas, right? Security, control, cost, and availability. Let's look at security. These public cloud providers, what are they doing? The public cloud providers, they have come up with a model where they're now offering extensive security measures. But on the other side, we know, many of them make it difficult to use these defenses by the nature of the deployment in itself, by the number of tenants that they host. The very nature of public cloud infrastructure allows data to be accessed from anywhere, right? And data often must travel exposed to open internet when we talking of public cloud. Which leaves it vulnerable to theft or infection by malware. And businesses have realized this. So that's their concern around security. Is that holding back? I would say yes, it's holding back to moving to public cloud. But you have an option of private cloud. You have got options of hybrid models, which can further be explored. Coming to controls, for today's companies, few assets are more valuable than the data. And what is more important is where it is located, how is it managed, and where it goes. And that level of control often isn't possible in public cloud, right? So again, the option of moving to private clouds or having hybrid models. What made it more difficult, I would rather say it was healthy for the customers. What made it a little difficult for the businesses to get right in terms of cloud deployment were also laws and regulations, right? We saw GDPR coming into play, which actually tied up hands in saying, can we move to cloud? If we move to cloud, what is it that we will need to comply with? So those kind of control questions still stay in business minds. They say, okay, let's just stay on-prem. Rather than actually getting into complications where where authorities can put penalties on us, right? Coming to the cost part of it, aside from the ease of use, one of the key benefits of public cloud is that it's relatively inexpensive. For companies that are just starting out and can't afford the upfront expenses of servers, storages, and other physical IT infrastructure, public cloud computing offers a simple and quick solution that won't break their budget. At a certain point, however, and tying back to my previous point, the public cloud ceases to be cost-effective solution. You may find that your spend is the same, but by the time you have realized the benefits of the cloud, so I would say people should give themselves a chance to see what benefits cloud can bring to their businesses. And touching on the last aspect of availability, we have come to a level where we need everything. We just had a voltage fluctuation in our office and the fear of we losing this webinar, right? So availability, right? Availability has become such a big issue that we want everything available at all times. And I touched about this in the previous point, but we all know that data availability is crucial to the success of any organization. Server downtimes can affect business operations, leading to reduced productivity, lost opportunities, and lastly, it can also tarnish your brand image, right? If you don't have access to your data when it is needed. So while public cloud providers claim the benefits of being able to access data from anywhere in the world, that access doesn't amount to much if the provider is experiencing system downtime. And the system downtime is directly proportional to availability for a lot of businesses. So yes, these are four areas which I feel are concerns to businesses and which is holding them back from moving to a cloud environment.
Yeah, very well summarized there and very, very comprehensive. A lot of much deeper insight, to be honest, than I even thought of. And I think that, this is a reality. We really do need to recognize that there is a situation facing the segment right this second. It is not as easy as we try to make it out to be. A lot of the messages, particularly from the vendors, the big multinational vendors, is it's an aggressive move to cloud. And while that might be very sensible on paper, there is a journey, and it's often called a journey to the cloud. These are very realistic problems and challenges that a lot of our leaders are facing. How do they plan out that journey? Are they making the right choices? Are they using the right format of end-user computing? Are they exercising all of the options available to them, or are they just going blindly into one solution or one type of format alone? So all great discussion here. I want to just start taking a few questions that are coming through. I'm very grateful that we have some good comments and questions coming through. And this note is to our audience. Please keep that coming through. Become part of our conversation. Make the best of having our expert guests with us this morning. So feed your questions through. You will be part of the conversation if you do so. All right, Adil says here, one of the biggest holdbacks of remote work is trust. Managers simply don't trust their people to work untethered. They're used to managing by counting butts and seats rather than by results. That's certainly a valid point from a culture point of view, and I think we can probably pick up on that later on when we talk a little bit more about people. Adil goes on to say that if people are forced to work at home for an extended period, as it appears they will be, managers will have to learn that it's results that matter. Yeah, so definitely an important point in terms of, setting up to be a little bit more of an output-oriented company. And I think that, we will address all of these topics over the next little while as we get deeper into some of the subjects that we will cover today. There are certain realities from a people aspect, from a management aspect that we need to think of that extend beyond just technology. I think technology must provide the workflow to make all of these people things, get addressed better. And then we have Noko who asks the question, and then we'll see which of our guests would like to take this question. The question is, what's the impact of Poppy on cloud adoption? What is available to mitigate? I think this is a very, very broad question. As it turns out, we do have some material that could perhaps be of help to you, Noko. Please, when we send the link on the chat box, which I expect we will do very shortly, please click the link and request that you get some help or you get some information after this webinar on this particular point of Poppy and cloud adoption. I will, however, give Nishith an early opportunity to maybe respond if this is something, Nishith, that you would like to do during the show, or we could take it up after the show. So the question is, what's the impact of Poppy and cloud adoption, and what is available to mitigate?
Kirsten, this topic has again, the way I spoke about cloud, these are not new concerns. They have been there, and people keep asking this question. Let me not take Poppy. Let me just go even more broader with GDPR, right? Poppy, we have known. Poppy has been with us for years. There were straight answers to questions. There were straight checklists available. If you can really comply to, you can move to cloud if you comply to everything, right? But let's look at GDPR in itself, right, which is a big brother probably of Poppy. GDPR came, and let me take an area where there were no regulations at all. Poppy has been in South Africa, right? Some countries always had their data protection bills. Let's talk of Middle East, which had nothing. GDPR comes, everyone by the time in their transformation journeys had cloud at the core and now don't know what to do with it, because now we're dealing with data which has to probably move out, and they don't know. Sometimes when you adopt to a cloud service, you don't know where all it is getting replicated. So sometimes when I went into those discussions and spoke to customers, they said, "Oh, we are very happy to adopt cloud, but now there are data regulations or compliances which are bothering us. What do I do with it?" My question to them was, I understand the anxieties, but have you really gone back to your cloud service provider and have this chat? The first that I opened for a customer was with an OEM, and the OEM comes back saying, "Oh, okay, yes, we know, we have been doing this, we were ready for it. GDPR is not new for us. We knew what is going to come in it. We have been working on how do we comply with the requirements. This is the checklist available that you need to fill, give it to your authorities, and then you get approval to move to cloud." And the same applies to Poppy, right? If you know what you're trying to comply with, there are solutions available. And that's where I spoke of those models. If you just stay in the public cloud, maybe some questions may be difficult. But if you look at other deployment models where you have option of going hybrid, what data do you really keep out, what you keep in, or a private cloud, which is just yours, where you straight away anyways comply. I don't see challenges. I feel there's a way that you can actually go and adopt cloud.
Right. Okay, so I think that inside of your answer there, you did cover a degree of remedial action. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead and jump over to Tessa quickly, and just start addressing some of the more specific challenges head on. Tessa, tell us, in terms of payroll in the cloud, what are some of the challenges?
KG, yeah, a bit of a hot topic.
Yeah.
From our experience, there's been slow adoption for HCM in the cloud, specifically in Africa and for your mid and upper tier enterprises. And there's valid reason for it, right? When we talk payroll, we're talking highly sensitive employee data. So big concern aligned with what Nishith was saying around security. Then if you look at certain clients, the existing payroll systems have heavy customization based on union negotiations or their current business processes. And these heavily customized solutions aren't ready for transition in the cloud. And it's not advisable in some cases to take that to a pure cloud model. Then, some scenarios, cloud options don't always give the customers the freedom to customize to their exact needs. And so companies have to spend the time to revise and change their business processes towards a more standardized approach. And then, another challenge we're finding specifically for South Africa is that traditionally your cloud data has been stored outside of South Africa. And that's a big no-no for certain companies, specifically in the public sector. They want their data stored locally, and they're required to store it locally in South Africa. So those are kind of some of the main challenges we face in the payroll space.
Very realistic challenges. And again, it goes back to that narrative of it's one thing to just keep pushing the cloud narrative, but it's another thing to start inspecting and double clicking one level deeper and going, what are some of the holdbacks and specific workloads, and how do we pipeline these activities relevantly on our journey to the cloud? So on that note of solutions, how do we get around this, Tessa?
I'd love to say you do 1, 2, 3, you wave a wand, you chant something like together with Adapt.IT we achieve more, and it's done. But the reality is, that's not the case. There's no real cookie cutter approach to solve these challenges. For us, it helps that our HCM team have long-standing track records for success. What works well for the team is aligning closely with the clients, identifying likely bumps in the road in advance, and developing a payroll implementation roadmap that gives our customers the greatest possibility and chance for success. In some cases, we give them the opportunity to put their as-is payroll solution into our cloud. It's SAP certified, it's highly secure and available. We cover legal country patches, and it's hosted locally. And we found this is a great bridge to cloud for those that aren't ready or confident to make that jump just yet. And we allow them the time and space to look at their customizations, rework back to SAP standard, and giving them that time to get ready and transition into the cloud in their own time. Cloud is there. It continues to shape the way we do business in the future. And so it makes sense for businesses to evolve in order to make themselves relevant and more efficient. But we look at different ways that works best for the customer in their scenarios.
All right. So is it a safe thing for me to say then that realistically, when we look at this conversation about payroll in particular, what's required is that we inspect that particular customer situation, that particular environment, and based on the infrastructure, based on that company's existing platform investments that they have already purchased or have running, a decision should be made based on that particular customer situation, and we shouldn't try to advocate any kind of blanket approach, but we should be inviting the opportunity for these leaders to get into a dialogue that's very specific to their environment. Is that a fair summary, Tessa?
100%. And just because certain models are moving, let's say they're moving to S4HANA, they're moving to the cloud in the ERP, they don't have to be held ransom by that and move payroll at the same time, right? They're different approaches, and it's best to find the one that works best for your company.
Yeah, and I think that I just want to, at the risk of overdoing this point, I want to just reiterate the fact that do not use payroll as a reason not to make a broader move towards the cloud. This can be done in a phased approach, and you can single out the payroll function outside of the bigger deployment and keep that on the roadmap. And there are methods and systems in place to be able to move the bulk of your general ledger into the cloud with associated services, leaving payroll in some kind of on-premise format. The specifics of that format should be looked at in your environment and should be discussed directly with you. And on that note, I'm going to say that all audience members, please keep the questions coming, put it into the Q&A box. More than that, request time, request some post-event consultation with our speakers, even if you don't want to consult necessarily with our speakers, and if you would like some further information sent to you, or you'd like some kind of follow-up, please put that request into our survey, our post-event survey. The link has been shared in the chat box. And I invite you to just become part of our post-event follow-ups by making very specific requests to us. So go ahead, we'll take that upon ourselves to ensure that we get around to absolutely every single request. So please make the best of the service. And in doing so, please also complete the quick survey. It's going to take you nothing more than 30 seconds. It's all very quick drop downs that you can just quickly select, and you can just give us some feedback. What did you like about the show and what didn't you like about the show? Remember, we do this for your benefit and enjoyment and for you to get value from it. So we take your feedback very seriously. Getting back to the conversation here, Nishith, I want to start confronting a very important point, and it's something I touched on a little bit earlier here. And the point is really about deeply customized on-premise ERP systems. So as you know, South Africa is no different to many markets around the world, where a very specific tier of customer in the earlier days of ERP, perhaps even MRP, we grew into our ERP systems as the business grew and as the business evolved. So we, bit by bit, phase by phase, we started doing more and more and more on-premise customizations. Back then, a few of us, if any, believed that we'd get to a point where we're going to even move ERP into the cloud. So we didn't set up for that in advance. We wound up with these massive, heavily configured, heavily customized on-premise deployments that's now quite difficult to move into the cloud. What's your commentary on this particular situation?
Kirishan, I always see technology as an enabler, and that's how my two tech kids into just doing technology has been. There will always be a solution available if you really want to think about it, and you can brainstorm. You can break the puzzle down into multiple things, but there are always solutions available. And that connects to the previous point as well when we were talking payroll. So technology is an enabler, there is a solution. You just have to see how it fits you. Now coming to a typical heavily customized on-prem ERP deployment concern of customers, which is not allowing them to move to cloud. The concern is actually not cloud. The concern is something else. We all know that legacy enterprise applications use a variety of third-party software components, and I'm sure most of you will agree with that statement, right? What is important to remember that while moving an existing application to cloud, the businesses which were with these third-party softwares, now these third-party components also need to be installed. And that's where confusion starts, as there are a number of third-party software components which are obsolete or not cloud-ready. So the fears come from there. It's not really the cloud fear. When they say customized on-prem ERP deployment, they're now talking of third-party components which probably are not cloud-ready. And when I say third-party components, sometimes it is the customizations which they did for their business when those features were not available into the ERP systems. Over a period of time, products have matured. There is a fix available for most of the business requirements now in one form or the other. So what I feel is when an enterprise opts for cloud computing, it needs to revisit its existing infrastructure before migrating its application and data to the cloud. The enterprises have to explore a way to speed up cloud migration rather than holding themselves back, saying, "Oh no, we have got a customized on-prem ERP problem, and what do we do about it?" We can help. Others can help. What you need to do is a readiness assessment of your environment to move to cloud, so that you know your problem areas, and once you know your problem areas, to provide a response to it. And that might not come as an IT team. It might come from the business who is okay. Now, they may not need a third-party application. They may say, yeah, I know the product has now got a component which can address my business need. Let's move to cloud and let's adopt that. That's the mentality business can now support IT with. So I feel, though it's a challenge, there is a solution available. To that extent, the answer is do a readiness assessment and see where you stand in terms of your readiness, and that might be a solution to your problem.
I really like that, and I think that it feeds very much into what Tessa said earlier about, instead of seeing movement to cloud as one single thing across this entire application base, it's really important to separate out all of the different components and say what can we move with greater ease and what do we have to leave on premise. As you said, it's very, very true. There were many instances in the past where features were built just because they weren't readily available, but today is a different day, and we got a lot of those features out the box sitting there just waiting to be activated in a cloud scenario. So what a business might have paid quite a lot for in the past, they could now just get very easily out the box with a single click. And I think businesses need to start seeing that there is a lot more out the box features available today that they were forced to customize in the past. So to move into the cloud is not going to be the same level of burden. It's not going to be the same level of hard work, because factually, they had to do that work back then, 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, but they just don't have to do that work from the ground up today. Yes, some mild configuration, but not necessarily the same depth of coding, for example. So on that note, Tessa, let's talk about this thing called rapid deployment, because now we're talking about things like mild, light configurations, etc. On the one hand, you have this great amount of promise that rapid deployment will get you the world's fanciest ERP in a week. And then on the other side of that equation, there's this constant fear that we absolutely cannot migrate to the cloud. So just give us your professional insight. Is this thing called rapid deployment real?
Very good question. And the answer is yes and no. So it can work well when you fit into a box. When there's some companies that are made for that box, and you get companies that are kind of happy to start in that box and kind of progress forward, and then you get companies that are squares, right? And they're not going to fit in that box. And we at Adapt.IT, we've seen all sorts of shapes and sizes, and we've used this to mold different approaches. We've developed accelerators, we've got some templates, and our aim is to help customers reduce investment cost, enhance the business case, and shorten time to value. And for us, it's really a time to value consideration. The approach itself hasn't just changed from a solution point of view. You can look into deployment approaches, and how they've evolved, right? We now talk Scrum, we talk Agile, and it's all really real. Customers no longer want that lengthy implementation with kind of this big bang at the end, and you're stuck with all these problems swept into one period. We've got to kind of try to fix it. We've been in those trenches, and it's painful. So customers are looking for incremental value, kind of bite-sized pieces that they can consume and manage, and expose that value to their business in quick time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it is important for us to note that this concept of a rapid deployment is probably a little bit more real than we think. It's no longer this concept that was just promised as it might have been many years ago, but today it's very much a far more realistic concept, and I really like your insights on that, Tessa. I think that it's also important for us to perhaps go ahead and suggest that, as companies confront this journey to the cloud, under the remote working format, it is important to start noting that, hey, in that first quarter of your deployment, go for as vanilla as possible, So the way you stage your deployment is also important. Like, try to start as light as possible and then go into the deeper and heavier configurations over time. So even as you switch cloud on, it doesn't have to be an overnight thing. It can be phased into the long term, which means that initial deployment is probably going to be more rapid than you think, because we, again, not going to do everything in one go. It's going to be phased in over time, and you're going to just turn more and more features on over time as we check that everything is working. So it's really one of those, it's beyond just a technology point. This is also a mindset point. It's also a strategy point. How do we go about designing these plans? Good. We have a
100%.
question here from Peace. How much does it cost for businesses to implement cloud and remote working in case of financial challenges and growth? Big question there, Peace. What I'm going to suggest that you do in this particular instance is that you complete a survey and that you request some follow-up consultation, so this question can be answered with you one-to-one. I think it's going to be safe for us to do that in this particular instance. For the rest of our audience, please feel free to keep these questions coming. Ensure that you make your voice heard. I will put each of your questions forward to the panelists. Okay, good. So let's move on to this point that Nishith mentioned earlier, which is security. Security was one of those 4 big points. Nishith, tell us, this concept of moving to the cloud, putting fundamental business data, customer data, the heart of the business into the cloud presents a security risk to a lot of business owners. What are your views on the security risk?
Kirsten, very interesting topic when it comes to clouds. Before I call specifics, I'm going to give you probably a list of risks the way I see it. But before I call those specific, I always tell my customers that some of these risks are linked to weak cloud security measures of the services, such as storing data without controls, such as encryption or lack of multi-factor authentication to access the service. These are risks, but can be mitigated, not that there are no solutions. Pardon me on this point, I myself is a business person, I'm not a security professional, so without going into technical details of the risks, but still highlighting risks I feel that revolves around is the loss of theft of intellectual property, compliance violations that always are a fear and regulatory actions associated with that, loss of control over end user actions, malware infections that unleash a targeted attack, which has been a problem. It's a known problem even with our mobiles now. Leave aside cloud or leave aside applications. Contractual breaches with customers or business partners, where a cloud provider might have said something, you would have interpreted it different, and now you feel there is something wrong with the contract itself. Diminished customer trust for various reasons. We can explore them, and there is a long list that can run when we talk of diminished customer trust. More additions to that is data breach requiring disclosures and notifications to victims. I just spoke of GDPR, increased customer churn, revenue losses. So I guess the list will go on, but these are some of those risks that we see in the public cloud. Talking to just a specific around revenue losses. News of the Target data breaches that made headlines and many customers stayed away from Target stores for the busy holiday season, leading to a 46% drop in company's quarterly profit. Now, this is public forum news, right? And now you're seeing it directly impacting the brand. Anyways, they're impacted on their revenues because of what has happened. And now a brand image, right, which is getting tarnished because of now news being available into the public forum. So I feel the list can be long, but yes, I feel these 8-9 things that I spoke about are the real business risks. And of course, then the specifics of technicalities around encryptions and other things.
Very comprehensive set of risks there that you called out. And I definitely think that, again, I'm going to go back to this point of, let's have the conversation. I think that this idea of not doing something because of a fear that there is a security issue. I think at this stage, we don't really have the luxury of just being able to avoid something entirely just because of a fear of something. We need to double click. We need to explore. We need to have a look at what's happening. What's the detail there? Are there specific security solutions, mitigations that we can put in place that would still enable the solution without compromising our data? And I think particularly as we've seen major investments happening in South Africa from an infrastructure point of view by some of the big vendors, the multinational vendors. I think that, there are so many options available to South African companies today, the likes of which many other African countries do not enjoy. Like we have big data centers that have been placed on our shores, and I think this is definitely worth looking into. So again, let's have the discussion. Let's see, in your particular situation, do you really have something to worry about, or should we just go ahead and at least start the conversation and pace things out and see what's going to work in terms of your different data sets and your different types of data, what can go into the cloud, what has to stay on premise, etc. So I definitely think this is a conversation that should be had. And again, if you want to follow up with any of our expert panelists, or you want to follow up directly with us, just make sure that you're hitting that survey link, you're completing a survey for sure, and that you are putting in a request there for some follow-up consultation. So let's talk here, Tessa. How about you give us some customer examples, some interesting customer examples?
So I'll talk to a payroll scenario. A common example that comes to mind and has occurred most recently within a government entity is that customers have concern around payroll data in a shared cloud. They often worry when we talk about the syndicates, everyone's on the same system, and therefore they believe that everyone has access to that same data. And this simply isn't true. So we sat with the customer, we took the time to show them the superior security checks, the data validations, and other measures that we offer in our cloud instance. And when they started to see that, it's allowed them to see the value stack up. And we were talking about it earlier, right? You don't need the infrastructure and the heavy resource to manage this old on-prem type environment. You leave that to us as the experts, and then you let that company focus on running their business, and they haven't looked back since.
Yeah. Interesting. Nishith, how about you? Anything that stands out to you?
I always say it's a puzzle. Get the puzzle right. You will not really have problems. I remember a case, and I briefly touched on that when I spoke of the GDPR compliance and all. I remember Money Exchange trying to adopt a cloud, and they're now having a fear. Money Exchange, can we really run on a cloud? Things can go wrong. Oh, we've seen this in the past where we had breaches on our normal on-prem thing. So is the cloud deployment a real story for us? So yes, the way Tessa said, leave it to us. We are here to help. There are solutions available. We know it's a puzzle. Don't do a hit and trial. Get it right. Do your readiness assessment. See what can go wrong. Look at your scenarios that can go wrong. Get the answers right, and then adopt it. So yes, multiple examples, and this was just one of those that I quoted.
Right. I think this is a great pair of examples that you guys have gone through. Let's confront one of the big topics here, people. And Tessa, I believe that you are the right person to discuss, to talk about people, right? This topic about people, the concept of remote work that extends beyond technology and into the realm of culture, how people work. What does this concept of moving our ERP to the cloud, what does it have to do with people? Does it have anything to do with people inside and outside the company?
So KG, yeah, from a kind of COVID angle, we've been connecting with our customers and our employees for regular catch-ups, and lockdown's been tough for everyone. If you're not careful, you can find yourself landing up in these very clinical, agenda-driven, specific interactions and engagements. We find ourselves sitting in back-to-back calls from morning to night. And in the beginning of lockdown, there was a definite increase in productivity. I saw it in my team. We saw it in our division. But everyone has their limits. Lockdown fatigue is a real thing. And people need that personal connect, right? So we find ourselves having to adapt. We found ways to interact remotely. You have to introduce workflows and processes for something that used to be a simple walk across the office floor to go and bounce an idea off a colleague, or that huddle around the table to do a final review of a proposal that we're about to send out, give it the thumbs up. All of this has changed, right? You have to find remote ways to connect, and you find yourself having to book time in people's calendars for what used to be discussed over a cup of coffee or at the smoker's den, right? So things are different. At As Adapt.T, we strongly encourage the cameras on in all calls. The entire feel and etiquette of the meeting changes when you can actually see each other. And this is encouraged across all levels. We do it in strat sessions, team interactions, checkpoints, training, wherever we can. And it helps kind of bridge that gap and build closer relationships, not only between our team members, but we've got clients nationally and globally, right? And now I get to sit and chat to a client face to face through a computer, but often I've never met these guys in person before, and now I actually get to see them and they get to see me. So it adds a bit of a different edge for someone sitting, say, in Singapore when we're sitting here. And I have to tell you something, I'm super proud of Adapt.T, how they've driven engagement with employees specifically during this time. We've had divisions doing kind of lockdown workouts. The guys wake up early and kind of do like a mini CrossFit session together as a team. We've got guys doing Friday afternoon drinks over Teams, kind of breaking down the week, dissecting it and looking forward to what's coming up ahead. And our team specifically, we've done some online games. The latest being Adaptionary, which is our own version of an online Pictionary. I can confirm no one in our team is going to be pivoting to a newly found renowned artist, but we've had some really good laughs. We've got people's kids involved, and it's a different element, but you've got to make it fun, and you've got to have that level of trust as well, right? You're not clocking hours anymore. People can sit in front of a laptop and not necessarily be productive. So you're looking for that value. You're looking, for different outcomes from people these days.
Yeah, fantastic. I love the concept of Adaptionary. If ever you're looking for an extra player, if you're short of a player, feel free to reach out to me. I would love to practice my Pictionary skills some more. So Ilana Stain says the following in response to your answer there, Tessa. Agreed. Beginning was good, but those still working from home are struggling without the social interaction. Need to do that at least once every now and then, face to face, not only online. Very important words there, and I think all these are very valuable inputs in terms of understanding the people dilemma that we're experiencing right now. This is just so, it's not just about systems, and if anything, the one thing we should as business leaders be doing better than anything else right now is seeking out ways to have technology or systems enable that people dimension. And to do it the other way around, just to have work being done for the sake of work, is completely, in my opinion, the wrong way to design. The correct way to design is to just continue to contribute and enable that people interaction so much more. The introduction of workflow that is people-centric, that's what's needed right now. All right. On that note, we have come to the end of our time. We haven't been able to get through all of the questions, and there are one or two things that have come through that I haven't been able to get round to. However, having said that, you still have the opportunity for post-event feedback and dialogue and contribution. So before you leave our show, please can you complete the survey. I want to thank our expert panelists for their fantastic contribution, really good practical insight, really good golden nuggets that we got today, that businesses can actually sit with now and think about and actually take some action on. These are some real pearls of wisdom that we got today. So thank you to our speakers. And on that,
thanks for having us, KG, and thanks to the listeners.
Yeah, that's awesome. And on that note, we've come to the end of the show. You can catch more of our podcasts, more of our webinars at our YouTube channel. So feel free to go ahead and check them out there. If you'd like to share this event, you can just share the link of the YouTube video with your colleagues if you'd like them to get some of these insights. And feel free to join us on our next show coming up soon. Take care, and that's a wrap.
Thank you, Kate.